Certainly welcome everyone to this first collaboration between Cora Systems and the PMO Squad. And we're eager to work together and help bring solutions to our industry. Joined by Philip Martin. Philip, if you could take a moment just to introduce yourself to everybody and let them know who you are.
Hi everybody, how you doing? As you probably guessed from the accents, I live in Ireland. I'm CEO of Cora Systems. We're a 22-year-old startup, as we keep telling people. Kind of like myself, young at heart, but maybe not as young anymore in terms of experience. We provide Cora PPM, which is a strategic portfolio management tool set. It manages the whole concept of selecting the right projects into an organization, and two, the execution of that. We spend a lot of time in this space. It's all we do. We love it. And we love conversations like what's going to happen today. And hopefully we'll get lots of questions from you guys that will maybe put us on the spot and get us thinking about different things that we haven't thought about before. We're about 100 people. We're global. We're in 53 countries worldwide. And we've got some of the rest of our team on the call here today as well. So delighted to introduce Lindy and Amanda in the background as well.
Well, thank you, Philip. My name is Joe Puz. I'm the president of the PMO Squad. We've been around for over 8 years now, and we're a project management and PMO consulting firm located in Phoenix, Arizona. Our primary product is the purpose-driven PMO, and we believe that for all organizations to deliver project management successfully, regardless of their methodology or framework, you have to start with why you're doing it. So I think we'll dig into that a little bit more as we cover the topics we have today of SRO and change management. Philip, SROs, right? Here's another term that we bring into our industry, right? The Strategy Realization Office. How does this come into play, and what do we do with that? What's an SRO, and what does it mean to you, and how do you work within Cora to work with them?
I suppose maybe it would be worth maybe taking a slightly different perspective. I'm guessing that a lot of the people on the call are probably from a project management or program management perspective. But if you took to answer that question, if you took maybe one step up the ladder, most people think that CEOs and senior management teams know exactly what it is they're doing and the direction they're taking, and have a very clear strategy of what it is they want. And quite often that's not the case. I'm not saying they don't, but they don't know everything. They don't know 100%. They're not closest to what's going on. They don't know exactly what's happening with projects or programs or the direction those programs are taking. And the people that do are the people that are in the PMOs. They're closest to it. They know exactly what's going on with that client or with that customer, with that initiative, and whether it will work, and they're probably the first to know whether it's going to work or not. And quite often, the decisions that CEOs make, and I'm one of those, is based on a gut instinct or a feel or something that's not data driven. It should be data driven, but it's not always data driven. And I'd love to say it was always data driven. They're never always data driven. And data driven decisions nearly always right. Non-data driven decisions, you're either lucky or in deep doo-doo, should we say. So basically the SRO, the S in the SRO is basically making sure that what you do is strategically aligned. And it's not always, it's no longer just the position of the senior management team to help decide that. Now the PMO is getting their say in it. And the whole concept of an SRO, this is something we started about 4 years ago. We looked at it and we thought, we've been talking to lots of clients, and we discovered that 10-15% of their project budgets every year was wasted on projects that they should never have taken on in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then we started analyzing the reasons why. And senior managers never really know why. They just want the 10 million they spent on that project that they shouldn't have started to go away and be brushed under the mat and to start new and not throw more good money after bad. But it's not as easy as that. And to start off with making those decisions getting the right strategy and knowing what'll work. It's not always just the senior management team that know or have the answers, or quite often they don't have the answers to that on their own. And what was the PMO now needs to have that strategic view of the world to understand and help management understand what will and what won't work. And I think that's the origin of SRO and where it's going. And I'll talk a little bit more maybe later on about the exercise we went through 4 years ago and where we're going with that.
Yeah, I was looking the other day at a article out on the PMI site. This is going back over a decade, and it was talking about the gap between strategy and execution. And historically, PMOs have been focused on the execution of projects. If you think about all of our certifications that we receive from around the world, whether it's from PMI or any other organization, is for the individual practitioner to be able to try to give them the skills and competencies to be able to go execute a project better. Nobody was focusing on, should we be doing the project in the first place?
Yep.
Right. So as an industry, we've invested billions, if not trillions of dollars into how to make people deliver projects better. And there's this gap with the alignment to strategy. And that sort of led to the birth of the enterprise PMO. And the mindset there was take that functional PMO that may be located in an IT department or within some other function of the organization and elevate that up to the executive level so that now as an enterprise function, it's more closely aligned to what the executive strategies are. One of the challenge I think that we've seen with the PMO squad is as we've worked with clients and within our industry, is the people who are in charge, the leaders of that enterprise PMO, have always been practitioners who are trained to execute projects. They weren't trained business leaders to interact with other executives to be able to get that strategic alignment in place that you talked about. So I think from our perspective in the consulting world, right, the SRO is the evolution of the ePMO, right? And actually removing out the execution side because that's what PMOs have historically done. And let's create a function that's specifically geared to strategy. And if we can separate those two, the PMO who hasn't been able to deliver for years at a strategy level no longer has to. We don't have to keep putting them into a situation where they're going to struggle. We're going to create the SRO that allows them to align on the strategy component with executives. And now we have two groups working together for the good of the organization as opposed to one which is having trouble executing on the strategy side. Is that something that you've encountered as well, Philip?
Yeah, and funny enough, we probably have seen that from a different angle. The people that so we're ultimately a software provider. So we provide software into this vertical, and the whole focus and my area of I suppose huge interest is around, okay, how do you select projects in the right way? And what we've noticed in the last year or two is the people who take on our software and implement it, and what happens is they suddenly have this visibility that maybe they've never had before, because normally it's just, it was life before that was project execution in their own space, in their own silo, if you like. Now suddenly they're rolling system out organizational wide, and they've got this visibility or this lens, if you like, into other areas of the business. And what's happening is now they're knowing more about how all this business pulls together, how strategically it should operate or it does operate. And they're also in a position to actually make suggestions as to how maybe that strategy should pivot. And invariably what has happened, and this maybe goes back to your point, is we've noticed that those guys generally get promoted within a year or a year and a half. And I'm not saying buyers over you get promoted. I'm not saying that, right? But it's just, it's the visibility that they gain from being strategic, more strategic around how projects are implemented is, it's just really interesting trend to watch. And no, we can't guarantee a promotion for everybody when they buy this over. No, I'm not saying that. But it's I suppose the last year, if you look at the last year alone, how people have had to pivot quickly, much more quicker probably than they thought. So last February, 12 months, I was in the US on business. By the end of February, I was locked down. I couldn't go anywhere. And I would have sworn our business depended upon me and our sales teams and our delivery teams all being able to meet eye to eye. Yet here we are today on a webinar chatting away about SROs as if we were right beside each other in the same room. So businesses have pivoted, but they need an ability to be able to pivot quickly. They need a team that is able to enable that quickly. One other maybe example to go into, I'm trying to think of, you guys have Southwest Airlines in the US. We have our copycat version of that is Ryanair, where apparently Ryanair is not near as nice to deal with, but they do this. Everybody knows what their strategy is, right? So everybody knows that you pack in as many as you can into the airplanes. You turn around the airplanes on the ground as quick as possible. So the longer they're more time they're in the air, the more profitable you are. And literally, I don't know what it's like in Southwest, but if a Ryanair flight is taken off, you've got a queue of people waiting to get onto the airplane. And the problem with that is you have, sorry, not the problem. Sorry, the good part of that is you've now got your clients buying into the strategy of Ryanair and therefore helping Ryanair deliver its strategy better. So the clarification of its strategy across its staff, across its clients, much clearer. And as a result, your strategy implementation is much better. An SRO is an extension of that. It's basically making the strategy clear to the people in the project teams, in the senior management team, but also in the SRO itself. This is what we want to do. This is where we want to get to. And they're also the SROs are also the team that can pivot that very fast, very quickly. So I don't know if that makes sense to you. But...
Yeah, absolutely. And just as we continue to go forward here, we've had some additional people join since we started. So just give them a reminder. If you have a question or comment for Philip and I, please drop it into the chat. To ensure it goes visible for everybody, make sure you hit panelist and attendees. And if it's just for the panelists, you can just have it addressed to us. There was one item that came in is there agenda for today's content? And the agenda really is a fireside chat between Philip and I that's interactive with all the attendees. The main topics, of course, are SROs and change management and what we've experienced within the industry. What are the current trends that we're seeing, and what are some solutions that we can do to work within them? So Philip, jumping in from what you talked about, organizations that their agility and their ability to be flexible, we recently came out, I noticed the Pulse of the Profession was released from PMI for this year, and they had talked about Gymnastic Enterprises, a new term that they have coined. I'm not so sure I'm keen on the term gymnastic enterprise, but the premise behind it is an organization that is adaptive and flexible. And those types of organizations that are able to adapt and be flexible are more successful based on the data that they did in their research, regardless of geography, regardless of industry, than organizations that are more static. I think during the year of a pandemic, that makes complete sense that people needed to be flexible and adaptive to survive. I'm not sure how correct that would be necessarily in a period of time where there isn't a global pandemic happening, but certainly I can make the correlation that they've done, right? That if organizations can recognize the industry and the different risks and pressures that they face from their competition and internal, then they're going to react to that. And having the tools in place or understanding the processes with the leadership in place to be successful is going to help them be more successful. Right? And that's change management. That's organizational change management. Certainly an SRO helps those organizations do that at the strategic level. One of the ways the PMO Squad has helped organizations do this is we've changed up the mindset of a PMO. right? Since PMOs historically have been delivery based, nobody has asked them to meet with the executive team and answer the question, why do we exist? Do you truly want us to be an execution PMO? Or do you want us to be a strategy PMO? Or do you want us to be a governance PMO, right? There's different choices there. So we've come up with purpose-driven PMO as our signature service to help organizations build a PMO that actually aligns with what the expectations are from their executives. So PMOs historically that have been delivery based, and an SRO was born out of that because they weren't focused on strategy. I just say, why didn't we keep the PMO in place and align the executives and the PMO together to say, we want you to focus on strategy? And then your PMO would have been a strategy-based PMO. So I think the fundamentals have always been in place for the SRO. We just never have brought the delivery side and the strategy side together to set common expectations of what we want them to do. And to your points you mentioned before about the utilizing your tools to be able to do that, that can be the conduit to start that discussion, right? To be able to get those two people to functions within the organization to work together.
Yeah, and like if you take that a step further, then Joe, like how do people do this, or how should they look at doing this? And it's quite often this question we ask. And by the way, Gymnastic Enterprises, it sounds like I'm going to pull a muscle just sitting at my desk here. So it's for us, right? There's 4 key steps, right, to pulling a portfolio together. And the first part is getting the inventory. Believe it or not, it's the one that most organizations struggle big time with. You get people that will pull together maybe. We have organizations that have a project inventory for each project. They have 500 or 600 pieces of data associated with that project. We have organizations that have 10, 15, 20. But the real killer is whatever data set you decide on, allowing people to partially fill that out is a no-no. And what we discovered is that project inventory, if you can get that in such a way that it's easy for people to fill it out, it will actually help you to decide or at least assess your portfolio. The next part is that assessment. So have you got duplicates in there? Have you got totally left field projects that just don't fit any strategy or any alignment? And what we're discovering is, again, this was something that was pretty much in the under the authority of a senior management team rather than an SRO. So now it's starting to move back to the SRO, and it makes perfect sense because they're the guys that know what the duplicates are. They're the guys that know, okay, what have we got capability to do, not do. Then the next stage on this is balancing. So you're looking at, okay, well, do we have capacity to do that? If you have multiple plants, are you able to actually balance the workload in one plant versus another one better? Is it the right level of capacity in that plant to do that particular project? Have they specialities in that particular type of project versus this plant over here, which is different specialities? And it's weighing that up with things like compliance, with risks, just basically with scenario comparisons. So 4 years ago, I told you we set out to put a product together on this. And we produced a prototype. It was always going to be a prototype after a year. And we threw it away. And we didn't like it for a number of reasons. But one of the key reasons we didn't like it was people don't have time to trawl through loads and loads of information to decide what is strategically aligned on their PMO and which one's the best fit and how does the capacity. They want you to tell them the answers. And what we wanted to do was some way of a scenario comparison that some way graphically showed how that would work. So we went back, and 3 years later, we finally come back with that. But that scenario comparison now becomes it's more like a 5 or 10 or 15-minute exercise once you've got the data, rather than a 5 or 6 week exercise. And the importance of that is you can now pivot quicker, much quicker. So you don't have, so what used to happen was people would decide their portfolios and that was their portfolio for the year. can you imagine if you decided your portfolio last February and
Yeah.
weren't going to pivot on that again until February of this year? The difference that would make to your business. So you got to be able to do that pivot quick and adapt. So if you look at the life sciences industry, definitely they are gone to the point where they're actually pivoting much quicker now. So they used to do it every kind of 6 to 9 to 12 months. Now they're doing it, we're seeing them doing it a lot quicker, a lot sooner. A lot more products coming in, a lot more clinical trials coming off. So they've got to be that flexible, agile, quicker organization to be able to adapt both strategically and from an execution perspective. So we're seeing that it's no longer a luxury, if you like, to have your PMO strategy aligned. It's now a critical thing in the world today, because you got to be able to do that pivot quicker. Things change quicker, faster. Again, yeah. Hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing for people to consider is, what's the size of the organization, the culture of your organization, and the complexity of the work you have. For instance, here in the United States, about 98% of the companies that exist over here have 100 employees or fewer. So they're small to mid-sized businesses. And those small businesses usually don't have all of the same functional departments or knowledge that maybe the larger enterprises have. And they may have the functions, but it may be one or two people that are being multifunctional, right? They cover both areas. So they don't have the time to slow down and think strategy and then pair execution afterwards, right? They're always just on go, go, go. And what we try to do with them is give them a pause, right? Take a break to be able to look at what your strategic goals are and ensure that you're behaving as a smaller organization, still adaptive, still flexible, still nimble, but at the same time, be strategic. Right? You don't have to be an IBM or an Intel or a large corporation to be strategically minded. You actually get more benefit from that, right? Because the amount of change that you would bring into the organization is more impactful for you because you are smaller. But the focus has to start with, are we working on the right projects? And some of the research that's been out there, I just had a guest on my show, the radio show last week, Stuart Easton out of the UK. And we talked about some of the research on this. Over 20% of the projects that are currently active, when asked, should we be doing this project, the respondents came back and said, the project's no longer valid. But they don't stop the project. They just keep going with the project, right? So you're wasting precious resources, either human or financial, within the organization on work that's no longer valid for what your current business case is. That goes back to your scenario planning, right? It has to be constantly reviewed at the executive level and within your teams to ensure what you're working on still works. You know, the pandemic's a great case in point. We may have had organizations that were focused on, we need a new CRM system in 2020, but soon afterwards they realized, no, we needed better network security to ensure that we can work remote settings and not compromise our enterprise. Having that ability to be adaptive and flexible is a requirement to be able to have a proper strategic alignment to what the organization's business needs are. Philip, I know in a few minutes you're going to have to step out for a few moments, and we're going to introduce a poll to the panelists. But any additional thoughts here before you step out? You're going to rejoin us.
I am, yeah. No, just I'm looking at some of the words in the chat from Rajan. There's pulling out some nice ones: daring and evolving. I love the word daring. I suppose part of my job as a CEO is risk reward, and I'm probably one of the more risk-taking type CEOs you'll come across, because I think, I don't know, I just enjoy the journey. I enjoy the being different. And I think PMOs, SROs, that's SRO takes a little bit of the daring out of it, because you're now setting the strategy, now you know what it is. But actually, it should be an exciting journey as well, because now instead of working on a set of projects that you've been told to work on, you're now working on a set of projects that you decided on, and you understand why they fit in there. And now suddenly you're part of that process of actually deciding the direction of your organization. So at 100 people, it's probably critical that you get that right. If I'm a big 440 billion organization or 4 billion organization, 40 billion would be nice. Let's say I'm a 4 billion organization, making a couple of wrong decisions on projects that cost me 100 million is probably something I can absorb. If I'm a 100 person organization and I make a 1 or 2 million mistake, that's an expensive mistake to make. So understanding how you can actually pivot quicker, make those decisions better, be involved, and yet enjoy that journey as well while you're doing it, key, really key to the whole thing. And we're starting to see more and more of that. So yeah, I'm going to step out for a minute too. I'm really sorry, I got to step out for about less than 5 minutes, but I'm leaving you good hands for a second.
Absolutely. We'll see you in just a few minutes. And for all of our attendees, I just launched a poll for all of you. If you can take a moment to read that. We've been talking about strategy realization offices. So do you have one in your organization? And if you do have one, has it been in place for a year or longer? Have you ever heard of one before? But are you wanting to start an SRO? So we'll give this a moment or two to get our results in, and then we'll continue the discussion. And Philip, as he mentioned, will be joining us here in a few minutes. He'll be back. We'll give it a few more minutes for folks to be able to respond. Well, we have one response that you've had your SRO in place for over a year. It's fantastic. I think you would be in the minority around the world, but nice to see that you've had that in place. And we are going to end the poll in 10 seconds. All right, so we ended the poll, and fairly even split here between yes, you have an SRO, or no, you do not have an SRO. We'll leave that up for a minute. Reminder for everyone, if you have some questions, pop it into the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing the poll results at this time. I do see a question came in from one of the attendees, Steve Fulmer here. How do you differentiate between long-term purpose and short-term goals? For instance, human environments and distractibility often react without thought or analysis to appropriate context. And thanks for the question, Stephen. I know Stephen, and I know Stephen has been a guest on my show as well. He is fantastic at what he does and digs really deep into the change management questions and why we have change and how we react to that. You know, for me, long-term purpose and short-term goals, your goals should be aligned to your purpose. It may be a milestone or goal that you're trying to achieve in a near-term time frame, but your goal should still be aligned to purpose. So overall, what is your organization trying to achieve? Are you an organization that's focused on, for instance, in life sciences, for the improvement of mankind through medicines or treatments that are going to improve the quality of life? But a near-term goal may be the development or a production of a medicine to get that out of testing and into the market, right? So for me, one is strategically aligned as to why you're doing what you're doing. And very important to have a purpose statement to be able to really set your organization's direction and goals. And then after that, you come in with your goals, and goals can be set whether they're yearly or every 6 months or so, but have a recurring process in place to be able to establish how those goals react and align to your purpose. As an example, within the purpose driven PMO framework that we help organizations implement to improve their PMOs, we work with the executive and the PMO team to put in place quarterly reviews because businesses are so dynamic. I don't want to call them gymnastics enterprises because it doesn't feel like it fits for our industry, right? But we are dynamic and organizations are evolving quickly. If we're not level setting and confirming our purpose on a quarterly basis with the PMO, then we're going to be out of alignment with what executives are doing, right? Executives have to react continuously throughout the timeline of the organization. And it's upon us as a PMO to be able to react with them. We have to be able to adjust projects. We have to be able to cancel projects. We have to ensure the portfolio is being aligned properly. So for me, it's a continuous effort. It's not a once a year effort to ensure that we're working on the right things. Our goals have to be continually looked at. In purpose-driven PMO, we have relabeled the PMO to be purpose, measure, optimize. And the optimization is critical to the long-term success because that's giving us the flexibility to be able to go in there and change how we have our team, our playbook, how we execute to align with the changes that we see within the organization. And our failure over time to have a purpose-driven PMO has been one of the reasons, the root of which the SRO is formed, right? If we're not aligning with executives, then the executives will bring out a function within the organization that's going to allow them to have their strategic alignment in place. So I think it's paramount for us to be able to understand what is our long-term purpose, as Stephen mentions in his question, but it's also critical to know that there's goals that you have to have in place to incrementally achieve the progress that you need to accomplish those long-term purpose statements or objectives that you have in place. So Philip, I see that you have returned. Thank you for returning back to us. One question I have for you is you described the scenarios and how you've evolved your product to be able to get to the scenarios that you're with. And you also described a little bit earlier that the PMO leaders who utilize these find themselves more quickly open for promotion. What's the connection, you think, between strategic alignment of a delivery organization or the creation of an SRO and promotions or the ability to elevate one's career going from a delivery career, kind of the historical definition of the PMO, into a leadership role or more strategically focused career?
Yeah, I guess this is something we noticed. We probably noticed it about 10 years ago. And you have to think maybe from our perspective, it's the nature of implementing a system like this. So what happens is you rarely are just implementing in one small part of the business, or sometimes you are, but nearly always you're doing it to try and get visibility or control and visibility across the whole organization and feed that kind of central dashboard view, if you like, back up to senior management team. But in order to configure a system and set it up so that you can bring all those areas together, you got to understand how that area works, but you got to understand how all the other areas work as well. And you got to understand, okay, do they mesh together? And if they don't, you're suddenly starting to say, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing this in two places, or maybe we should actually be doing something different with this area to complement this one over here. Or maybe we'd actually be better off dropping this and doing this. And you're starting to see synergies, if you like, between the different parts of the organization. What that does is that person or persons that actually get that visibility become hugely valuable to senior management. So what happens is you become their eyes and ears on the ground. You can tell them actually what you're proposing won't work. And believe me, most people think, okay, you can't tell senior management things like that. Senior management teams love things like that. They love people coming to them, telling them that. Obviously, you're not going to tell them they're doing a bad job, but you've got to tell them that basically it's this will work, or did you think about this? And you have the ability of doing two things. You have the ability of making yourself a hero, but you have also the ability of making them a hero. And invariably, that's by actually bringing that control and visibility into the whole organization and having, I guess, historically it's been having a level of governance over the projects, but now almost you have governance over strategy setting, governance over, okay, well, why are we doing this? We shouldn't be next or near this. This is not our sweet spot. Why are we doing this? Or actually, I get it. There's a whole new niche opening up and we should be going after this. And what has happened invariably is the people that actually have rolled out these systems, started asking these types of questions, have become really valuable. And they're much more valuable as a senior management team level or a higher level than probably they are at the implementation level. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way towards implementation levels. It's just you've suddenly got a broader visibility across the organization that maybe they don't even have. So that's what we've seen in the past. I don't know. Does that make sense, Joe? I think if you think about it, it's perfectly logical. There is somebody else came asked before in a previous conversation I was having was, okay, well, by putting yourself out there and getting involved in an SRO and getting involved in strategy, are you actually opening yourself up to being more vulnerable, if you like, in your own organization? I think that was the word they used as well at the time, was basically, okay, am I opening myself up? Like, I'm quite happy just delivering my projects over here. I don't really want this strategy piece to come into my life at all. And there's room for both in the world. So you don't necessarily have to be the one that actually does the strategy piece. We're always going to need people that are experts at delivering projects and making sure they're executed properly. So it just depends really on what you want your career to be looking like as well.
Yeah, I see John Mcgrath is in our attendee list, and he has posted a blog, I believe, out on the Chorus site on the difference between SROs and PMOs. And you know, when I read through that, one of the things I noticed was a PMO can be an SRO if you have a purpose that is to deliver strategic initiatives and a charter that allows you to align with your executives to manage the strategy component. But an SRO can't be a PMO because the SRO is really focused not on execution at all. It's focused on the outcomes. It's focused on the decision making. It's focused on the portfolio and the strategic alignment of work that then has a handoff to the PMO or the delivery team to be able to go execute. So I find that interesting because now what we've done is we've potentially created some dynamics within the organization that are more complex, that we have created two functions that could be absorbed within one. However, if your organization hasn't been able to successfully do it with one function, right, the PMO, and you have a need for a second function, the SRO, then it's a necessary complexity, right? Because ultimately what we find today, depending on which statistics you look at from which organization around the world, projects success rates are only around 50 to 55%. So something's not working, right? We have to find a better way to be able to deliver projects for organizations. We've tried the traditional waterfall approach. We've brought in agile approach. There's now the trimodal approach of some waterfall, some agile, and a hybrid, the blend between the two, because we're always looking at the execution side. We're trying to solve the problem of better success rates by improving execution. What we haven't spent enough time on is how do we improve project success rates upstream by looking at, are we working on the right projects, and getting leadership in the organization all to rally to the strategic decisions. And when you focus your time, energy, and resources on a smaller number of projects, but are more strategically aligned and have the impact that the organization needs, your success rates increase. So working fewer projects actually has more result than working more
Okay.
projects, right?
Yep.
Organizations get pulled too far apart by working on a larger portfolio. So it's actually decreasing the number of projects to be strategically aligned that helps improve project success rates. With a system in place to be able to measure that and give the organization the data, they can see those results. Right? We work with organizations to help them structure themselves that way and build the process to do that. But you also need the tool to be able to go in and support all of those processes you're now working towards.
Yep. And I think what you've just talked about relates to, I see Stephen's question there in the chat. I think it relates to that as well. So from our point of view and from assistance point of view, um, I think the way in which you anchor long-term versus short-term goals, maybe I was going to say a couple of years ago, but maybe it's still actually present nowadays. You get the CEO hunches, or you get the as Stephen calls, the human interaction that says, okay, well, I think this is a good idea. We should do this. And there's zero data behind it. It's a gut or it's a hunch by somebody that says, actually, we should do this. And invariably, organizations spend money on that. What you need to be able to do from a system point of view, and I can speak from this point of view because it's pretty much what we do, is you need to be able to anchor that back to things like strategy. So for us, it's very important that you're able to enter in, okay, what your strategy is. So it's always there in front of people. They always know, okay, I'm doing this project, it's going to deliver 20% of this piece of the strategy. And then I can actually look at the table, show me all my strategies, all my initiatives, and show me my total of those strategies being delivered. So I actually at least have a subjective view of what I will deliver against my strategy. Now, what happens if you make those short-term decisions that Stephen talked about, or if somebody comes in and says, we should do this. Okay, well, if somebody decides to do this extra piece over here, you haven't got resources to do the 2 or 3 that are currently at the bottom of your list. So everything's going to get bumped down. So suddenly, if you take out those projects, what happens to my strategy? You might, even though they're mundane projects to deliver, they might actually be delivering 30 or 40 or 50% of the strategy. And if you bump them off the list, suddenly the delivery of that strategy goes right down. So having that visibility, that really in front of you on a dashboard, when somebody makes those decisions, those short-term decisions that Stephen talked about, sometimes they can be right, sometimes they can be spot on, but you just need to be aware of the impact of those. Another example would be on a dynamic funding source. So somebody might decide, okay, well, you know what? We're actually cutting that budget in half. That's all fine. But actually, there were 10 projects in the second half of the year, depending on that budget being a full budget. So if we're now cutting that budget, what impact will that have on my delivery? So now I'm looking at the funding sources. I'm looking at the ones that are overspent and that we can't deliver. And then now I'm trying to make a decision of, okay, well, the top 5 projects are still going to get delivered, but the bottom 10 now are going to get cut because I don't have a funding source anymore. So it's all this, the ability to be able to do this what if before you make those short-term decisions or those, I suppose, knee-jerk reactions, if you like, to a situation. And quite, you can't blame people. We would probably have done it ourselves in last March. We said, okay, what do we need to do to consolidate and make sure that we're still delivering a good, successful solution product to the market in 10 years' time? Because no, we have lived through 2008, 2009, and we felt that last March we were just about to enter into another 2008, 2009. We took our lessons learned from 2008, 2009, and we applied them into last year. And guess what? We had a great year. So but I have to say it would have been more data-driven year than it was a hunch-driven year. So I guess, Stephen, in short, my answer to your question would be knowing the impact of, in an easy way, knowing the impact of what those human environments and those distractions that you get when you're delivering projects, what impact, if you listen to them, what impact they would have on your overall delivery.
And we are about 15 minutes away from coming to the conclusion here. So if you have additional questions, please be sure to add them into the chat. One thing I wanted to touch on, we've talked around it, but I don't think we've talked directly to the change management component involved in all of this. Again, in that same Pulse of the Profession that just recently came out, they talked about how PMOs and project management are starting to have this evolution towards the humanity of the PMs and the teams, the project teams, and understanding the human behaviors and looking at a different way to approach the project, not just from a traditional kind of taskmaster that you would have for the project manager, but how to get the best motivation and influence out of team members by understanding who they are as people and how they respond to change. And I think all of that's necessary. And I think it's the evolution of project management and project delivery that we're looking at that. But it's still the people side, right? I mean, it's still the delivery side. We're not on the SRO, we're not upstream trying to make those decisions. So I think we can attack, this isn't an either or, right? We don't have to stop trying to improve delivery to focus on strategy. We have to attack both, right? We have to make sure we're working the right projects and we have to do it in the right way. And part of that, the delivery side, is understanding that every project is a change initiative, right? The definition of the project is we're introducing something new to an organization. So how we go about utilizing change management techniques, how we go about understanding how people react to change, how to influence people and organizations through change, all become critical. So the role of a project manager isn't just executing tasks and ensuring the team is on point, but is the organization receptive and understanding of what's coming? And I think it's equally important for us to understand the change components as well as the SRO components that we've discussed earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in the PMO circle and you talk about change, I guess most PMOs think, okay, well, that's an increase in my schedule and it's probably going to increase my cost of my project, and that's the way they think. I suppose the big impact for us in the last year around change, and it's been really, really topical, is a lot of our organizations that are what I would call client-facing organizations or commercial organizations. So they have a client delivery that they're in the middle of, and there's a change happening. Typically, what would have happened was previous life would have been an engineer maybe in the field who, I don't know if you deal with engineers, or those of you that do deal with engineers in the call will understand this one. Engineers seem to be allergic to red tape, and so they really just don't like filling out red tape. So they'd much rather just make the change happen and not get paid for it, which is a commercial no-no for most organizations. But you would be amazed at the amount of organizations that leave money on the table with their clients because they don't manage change properly. That's one view on the change. So one of the big introductions we brought into that is actually allowing the change to happen on mobile, so that you actually make all that red tape go away and you make change almost streamlined into your PMO process, that it's not a chore for an engineer to do, or it's not a chore for somebody to sign it off. You got it plugged into workflow, it automatically gets signed off, and it automatically adds to your cost book, so that you're seeing, okay, that change cost me $15,000. And that goes to my bottom line. And now my revised estimate for this project is the original estimate plus that $15,000. And I'm going to send the client a bill for that $15,000 plus 20% margin. So you're plugging the change in the whole way right throughout your process almost seamlessly. So there's not a lot of effort, not a work. I would like to go back to Bila has asked, and I hope I pronounced your name properly, has asked a question there around the health and safety and environment climate changes in the PMO chapter. I can't tell you the PMO chapter, but I can tell you actually what we're seeing. So in the last year, it's got to be zero travel. So I mentioned Ryanair, all their planes are on the ground at the moment. Every plane is on the ground, or almost every plane is on the ground. So where there's been a big uptake is this remote working, remote project management, remote teams, remote collaboration. All of that has become more and more important for organizations. That change probably links into that as well. So the ability to be able to do that, all that remotely, without actually having to go face to face, give somebody a piece of paper saying, here, sign this off, Mr. Client, or my manager needs to sign it off. It's all done remotely. The whole process is all done remotely. So from a green footprint, environmental and climate changes, I know it's very, very, very topical here in Europe. I think it's becoming, again, a lot more topical in the US as well. We're starting to see some of that as well. And it's probably been forced on us over the last year. And the nice impact of it is it will probably, it'll probably stay with us once we go back to full-blown work. I know you guys are a lot further ahead of us on vaccine rollout. But hopefully we start getting some of your leftover vaccines very shortly and we get back to work over here as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to the question. It's hard to answer a question like that because each PMO becomes unique to the organization that they're part of. And it goes back to what we've built within the PMO Squad, right, is the purpose-driven PMO. So it ties into what is the purpose within your organization. Certainly the well-being of the individual, the organization, and the climate should be part of that.
Yeah.
But what should it be? I don't know, because it really depends on your organization and their purpose and how to move forward. We see certainly lots of change within the world today where new organizations are popping up where a percentage of the proceeds of all sales go to human and environmental issues. And it's a new type of organization, right? That's focused on the product or service they're providing, but also the community in which we live, the environment in which we live. So that sort of organization is going to have a different answer than maybe what we would have considered a more traditional organization. So thank you for the question, Biplab, but I don't know if we have a great answer for that one or not at this time.
It is interesting. If you look at the PESTEL, I don't know if any of you know PSTL, so political, economical, social, so on. Up to about 2 years ago, I think most people paid lip service to the environmental and the social aspect of that. Yet you look at Greta, who has really pushed the environmental agenda, and you look at COVID, which has really pushed how we interact with each other. Both have completely changed our worlds in the last 2 years. Yet before that, we would have paid complete lip service to that. Even political, the change in political environments in the last 4 or 5 years, and again this year, it's just that it's constant churn, and it has a constant impact on the way we work, the way PMOs operate as well. Ultimately, the way PMOs operate.
Yeah, I would also talk about when we get back to change management perspective, psychological safety and understanding. There's been a lot of research on this, and high performing teams. One of the top cause of why they're high performing is there's a sense of psychological safety involved, that each of the team members are in a safe environment where they're able to express their opinions, they're able to give their thoughts, and not feel as if that they are being harmed in any way for being an open, honest team member. And knowing that change management is part of the project, right? Every project goes through change. Every PMO goes through change. Every organization goes through change. So building a team structure that embraces change as opposed to runs from it, right? Too often we see, oh no, here comes another change. What are we going to do about that? I think those organizations haven't prepared for the coming change, because it is coming. It's just part of what we have to do within the project delivery space. So creating a team culture that allows organizations to work successfully within that change environment, and giving the individual team members that psychological safety to be able to go forward and execute, I think is critical for organizations to be able to have success. At the same time as what we talked about with at the beginning, are we doing the right projects to begin with?
Absolutely. See, Derek has pasted the PESTEL one there as well. But I hope we've answered your question already on the environment climate piece. If we haven't, drop us another line in there. I am actually interested just in the outcome of the survey. I seen you had there. People that actually are wanting to start a strategy realization office. Why is that? I'd love to see your comments on why. Why do you want to do that? Why do you feel you want to do that? And what's the driver behind it? I would love if people put comments in just as to what's the thinking behind that. I think I can understand it, but I'm always want to learn. I'm always learning, checking from my audience. So just make sure that we're on the same wavelength as well.
And I see, Philip, we're about 3 minutes away from coming to the end. So as people are adding in their comments to your question as to their thoughts on starting the SRO, if you want to take a moment or two just to kind of wrap up the thoughts from today, what's a great way to be able to connect with you? How can people be able to learn about Cora systems and how your tools can help? Just take a few moments to go ahead and share with everyone.
Yeah, sure. Look, we're never do a big sell. If it's something you're doing, we'd love to help you. Have a call with us. If it's something we can even just have an hour call with you and give you a direction, then that's a job well done. And some stage in the future, you might meet somebody who's looking to set up an SRO and send them our direction. Happy to help out. I think Lydia or Amanda maybe might just drop in an email address into the chat to allow you to contact us. But I guess people often wonder, okay, how do we approach a project, or if they're setting up an SRO, how would something like this work? And you can go small approach, big approach if you want to, but typically most people will start with some kind of big toe in the water and test it out. My advice to you is we don't always come with the answers to your questions, but we'll ask you a lot of ones. And the questions we ask generally are very telling and will help us a lot in terms of helping you. So, for example, one of the first things we'll do is we'll give you a survey. It'll take about an hour to fill it out. But the outcome of that survey asks you a lot of questions that help us learn about you, but also helps you to learn about yourself. Has to be no outcome or definitely no definite next step to that survey. It can be something of use to you that actually, I suppose, gets you thinking about your own organization and maybe what you might do in 6 months' time or a year's time, or it might actually bring forward something that you're thinking and do it quicker. Most people, I suppose, just initially chat us and see if something is something here. If they're trying to do something around the SRO, or maybe moving from a PMO to SRO, or even sometimes just setting up the basics of a PMO. We're happy to have a chat. There's no strings attached. We're not pushy. We like having a chat with you. You never know what we learn from you as well. So look, I think I see Amanda's put the details in there in the chat there as well. So contact the guys, no problem. We'll happily help out.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Philip. And one of the reasons I think Cora and the PMO Squad get along so well is we've got that same culture within our organization. We're never going to push anybody to make a sale, because establishing a PMO or an SRO is something that you need to do and be committed to. When you're ready to do that, or if you already have one and need improvement, that's where the PMO Squad can come in and help you improve upon what you already have in place, or build one to help you get to where you want to go. The mindset is, I used to run a corporate PMO, and I hated when one of our executives would say, you guys aren't performing the way you need to. Maybe there's a little fine tuning you need. Can you go out and get some consulting work to bring in and help you get to where you need to be? And when we did that, there weren't any. There's management consultants out there, but there just weren't any specialists in PMOs. And after running many of these for so many years, that's when we broke free and started the PMO Squad, because in our industry, we need people who can speak our language, who understand our challenges, who know how to talk to executives and put solutions in place that are going to be impactful, and do it in a supportive way as opposed to a sales or a pushy way. So our purpose-driven PMO helps you align why your PMO exists in the first place before you look at the what and the how, right? Identify why first, then go about how we go and improve that. So I see Derek has added our contact information in the chat. I certainly want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please get in touch with Philip and his team, or myself and my team, if you have any follow-up questions or way that we can help you. And thank you all for your time today. we're going to wrap it up, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.